My aunt looked me dead in the eye at my bridal shower, champagne glass raised, and told a room full of 50 women that my marriage was doomed. 3 years, she said. That's all I'd get. And you know what? I didn't say a single word back. I just smiled, thanked everyone for coming, and let that prediction hang in the air like poison. That was 8 years ago. I'm still married. She's been divorced twice since then. But here's the thing nobody tells you about revenge. The sweetest kind doesn't announce itself. It just quietly unfolds while your enemies destroy themselves. This is the story of how I won by doing absolutely nothing at all. Let me take you back to where it started, because you need to understand what was really happening in that room. It was early May, unseasonably warm, the kind of day where everything feels possible. My best friend Lucia had rented out this gorgeous garden venue for my bridal shower, all white roses and champagne towers, the kind of setup you see on Pinterest boards. I was 27, engaged to Ryan, this incredible man I'd met in college and dated for 4 solid years before he proposed. We weren't one of those whirlwind romances. We were the couple people called boring, stable, predictable, and honestly, I wore that like a badge of honor, because I'd grown up watching love fall apart. My parents divorced when I was 12. Messy, ugly, the kind that leaves scars on everyone involved. My Aunt Veronica, my mother's younger sister, had already been through 1 divorce by the time I hit high school. She was the family's cautionary tale, though nobody said it out loud. The woman who married too fast, trusted too easily, and paid for it every single time. But here's what made Veronica dangerous. She had this way of dressing up cruelty as honesty. She'd say the most cutting things and then follow it up with, "What? I'm just being real. Someone has to tell the truth around here." And somehow, the family let her get away with it. Every single time. So when I got engaged, I knew Veronica would have opinions. I just didn't know she'd choose my bridal shower as her stage. The morning of the party, I was nervous but excited. I'd tried on my dress one last time the day before, standing in front of the mirror in the bridal boutique, and for the first time in my careful, cautious life, I'd felt absolutely certain about something. Ryan was my person. We'd weathered long distance, family drama, career stress, the whole 9 yards. We communicated. We laughed. We chose each other every single day. But there was this tiny voice in the back of my head, the one that sounded suspiciously like Veronica, whispering, "What if you're wrong? What if this falls apart like everything else in this family?" The shower started perfectly. Lucia had outdone herself with the details: little custom cookies with our initials, a mimosa bar, this beautiful spread of finger foods. Women from different parts of my life were mixing and mingling: my college friends, Ryan's mom and sisters, my cousins, my mom's book club ladies. The energy was warm, supportive, exactly what I'd hoped for. And then Veronica arrived, fashionably late as always, wearing this blood-red dress that seemed designed to draw attention. She made her rounds, air-kissing cheeks, complimenting the decor with that edge in her voice that suggested she could have done better. I watched her settle at a table near the back, pouring herself champagne, then pouring another glass before the first was even finished. My stomach tightened. I knew that look. She was gearing up for something. The toast started after we'd eaten, after the games, after I'd opened presents and blushed through stories about Ryan and me. It's a tradition, right? Women stand up, share wisdom, offer blessings to the bride. Ryan's mom went first, sweet and teary, welcoming me to their family. My cousin Jasmine talked about watching Ryan and me together and knowing we were the real deal. Lucia told an embarrassing story about the night I met Ryan, how I'd come home and told her, "I just met the man I'm going to marry," and she'd laughed at me because I never said things like that. The room was full of love, full of light. And that's when Veronica stood up. The conversations died down. People turned to face her, expecting another toast, another story. Veronica had this smile on her face, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes, and she raised her champagne glass higher. "I just want to say," she began, her voice carrying across the garden with perfect clarity, "that I think it's beautiful what you two have. Really. It's adorable." There was something in the way she said adorable that made my skin prickle. But let's be honest here, because that's what family does, right? We tell the truth. She took a long sip of champagne, and I swear the entire room held its breath. "I give it 3 years, tops. You two are too different. He's all ambition and career, you're all books and feelings. Trust me, honey, I know how these things end. I've been there. Twice. This won't last. The silence that followed was the kind that makes your ears ring. I felt 50 pairs of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. My mother's face had gone pale. Lucia looked ready to commit murder. Ryan's mom actually gasped. And me? I sat there in my white dress with my perfectly curled hair and my hands folded in my lap, feeling like I'd been slapped in front of everyone I loved. The humiliation was physical, a hot wave that started in my chest and spread outward. But here's the thing about growing up in a family where love is conditional and marriages fall apart: you learn to keep your face very, very still. I stood up slowly, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "Thank you all so much for being here," I said, not looking at Veronica, not acknowledging what had just happened. "It means the world to Ryan and me. Please everyone, enjoy yourselves." And then I sat back down. That was it. No tears. No confrontation. No dramatic exit. Just a simple redirect, like her words were a passing cloud instead of a bomb detonated in the middle of my celebration. The party tried to recover. People started talking again, too loud, too bright, desperate to fill the awkward silence. But the damage was done. I could feel it, this seed of doubt that Veronica had planted, taking root somewhere deep in my chest. After everyone left, after we'd cleaned up and loaded presents into cars, my mother pulled me aside. "Don't listen to her," she said, but her voice was tight with embarrassment. "That's just how Veronica is. She doesn't mean it. She's had a hard time with relationships, and sometimes she projects." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why, if that's just how Veronica is, we keep inviting her to things. Why we keep making excuses for her cruelty. But I didn't. I just nodded and said I was fine. Ryan was furious when I told him. He wanted to call her, to tell her off, to uninvite her to the wedding. "She had no right," he kept saying, pacing our apartment. "Who says that to someone? At their bridal shower? In front of everyone?" And he was right. She had no right. But I made a decision in that moment that would define everything that came after. "We're not going to respond," I told him. "We're not going to engage. We're not going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she got to us. We're going to get married, and we're going to build the best life we possibly can, and we're going to let that be the answer." Ryan stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You want to just ignore it?" he asked. "No," I said. "I want to make her prediction look ridiculous. I want time to prove her wrong. Words are cheap, Ryan. Our marriage won't be." If you're enjoying this story of patience and petty vindication, hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, what happens next is going to blow your mind. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever had someone publicly doubt you like this? How did you handle it? Because what I'm about to tell you about the next 8 years will make you rethink everything you know about revenge. The wedding happened 3 months later. Veronica came, wearing black like she was attending a funeral, sitting in the back row with her arms crossed. I barely noticed her. I was too busy promising Ryan forever, too busy meaning every word of the vows I'd written, too busy stepping into the biggest leap of faith I'd ever taken. When we walked back down that aisle as husband and wife, I didn't look for Veronica's face in the crowd. I didn't need to. I'd already decided she didn't get to live rent-free in my head. But late that night, after the reception, after we'd collapsed into bed in our hotel room, exhausted and happy, I thought about her words. 3 years tops. Part of me, the part that had grown up watching marriages crumble, wondered, what if she's right? What if we're doomed and I'm just too stubborn to see it? Ryan must have sensed my thoughts because he pulled me close and whispered, "We're going to make it. You know that, right?" And I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But Veronica's voice was there, a whisper in the dark. "This won't last." So I made a silent vow that night, one I didn't share with Ryan or anyone else. I vowed that I would prove her wrong, not through words or confrontation, but through the simple act of staying. Of choosing Ryan every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. I would build a marriage so solid, so real, that Veronica's prediction would become nothing more than a bad joke we'd laugh about years later. What I didn't know then, as I drifted off to sleep in my new husband's arms, was that proving Veronica wrong wouldn't just be about my success. It would be about watching her spectacular failures unfold, one after another, while I stayed silent and let karma do its thing. So here's my question for you, before we move forward. When someone publicly predicts your failure, do you owe them a response? Or is the best revenge simply refusing to give them the satisfaction of being right? Year 1 of marriage hit us like a freight train disguised as a honeymoon. And while Ryan and I were learning to navigate sharing a bathroom and merging bank accounts, Veronica was busy shopping for husband number 2. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because you need to understand something crucial. The first year of marriage is where most people either build a foundation or start collecting cracks. And Veronica was counting on us collecting cracks. 3 months after the wedding, Ryan got promoted. Sounds like good news, right? It wasn't. The promotion came with 60-hour work weeks, business trips to the West Coast, and a salary bump that barely covered the stress it caused. Meanwhile, I'd enrolled in a graduate program for clinical psychology, which meant I was drowning in research papers and practicum hours while working part-time at a community center. We went from spending every evening together to passing each other like ships in the night, leaving notes on the fridge and having conversations that consisted of "How was your day?" Exhausting. Yours. Same. This was the part Veronica had predicted. The part where life gets real and romance dies under the weight of responsibility. I could almost hear her voice in my head during those lonely nights when Ryan was traveling and I was eating cereal for dinner at 10 p.m., wondering if this is what the rest of my life would look like. Were we already failing? Was she right? But here's what Veronica didn't account for, because she'd never actually experienced it. Ryan and I had something she never had. We talked. Really talked. Not the surface-level "how was work" conversations, but the 3 a.m., sitting on the kitchen floor, crying because we're exhausted kind of talks. 4 months into year 1, we had our first massive fight. It was about dishes, which is never actually about dishes. It was about feeling unappreciated, unsupported, like we were roommates instead of partners. I said things I regretted. He said things that hurt. And then, instead of letting it fester, instead of building resentment brick by brick the way I'd watched my parents do, we did something different. We went to couples therapy. Not because we were broken, but because we refused to break. Our families thought we were insane. Therapy? Already? My mother asked, like we'd announced a terminal diagnosis. But that therapist, Dr. Chen, taught us something that would save us over and over again in the years to come: how to fight fair, how to express needs without attacks, how to choose each other even when it's inconvenient. By the end of year 1, we weren't the same starry-eyed couple who'd gotten married. We were stronger. Battle-tested. Real. And here's the kicker: Veronica met her second husband at our first anniversary dinner. We'd invited family to this little Italian restaurant to celebrate making it to year 1. The irony wasn't lost on me that Veronica was there, watching us toast to our survival. She brought a date, some corporate executive named Marcus with silver hair and an expensive watch, the kind of man who talks about his portfolio at dinner parties. They'd been dating for 3 months, she announced, and it was serious. Very serious. I watched her with him that night, the way she laughed too loud at his jokes, touched his arm possessively, shot me these triumphant looks across the table, like she'd won some competition I didn't know we were having. Ryan leaned over and whispered, "She's trying to prove something." He was right. But I had no idea what was coming. 6 months later, Veronica married Marcus in a wedding that cost more than our entire first year of rent. It was lavish, expensive, almost aggressive in its luxury. Destination wedding in Napa Valley, designer dress, celebrity wedding planner, the works. My mother was thrilled. Finally, she kept saying, "Veronica's found someone stable." I went to the wedding with this knot in my stomach, watching Veronica promise forever to a man she barely knew, and I realized something that made my blood run cold: she was racing me. This wasn't about love for her. This was about proving that she could do it better, faster, more successfully than I could. She needed to win. Year 2 of my marriage was the year we bought our first house. Nothing fancy, a little 2-bedroom fixer-upper in a decent neighborhood, but it was ours. We spent weekends painting walls and arguing about whether the kitchen should be sage green or cream. We hosted our first Thanksgiving, burning the turkey and laughing about it. We adopted a dog, this scraggly rescue mutt named Biscuit, who became our practice child. Life wasn't glamorous. It was grocery shopping and mortgage payments and learning that love isn't a feeling, it's a choice you make every day when you wake up next to someone whose morning breath could kill a plant. But it was ours. Solid. Real. Building something brick by brick. Meanwhile, Veronica's Instagram was a highlight reel of luxury. Private jets, 5-star restaurants, designer handbags, Marcus surprising her with jewelry that cost more than my car. But if you looked closely, and trust me, I did, you could see the cracks. The photos where her smile didn't reach her eyes. The captions that tried too hard to convince everyone how happy she was. My mother kept forwarding me posts. Look how well Veronica's doing. But I saw something she didn't. I saw a woman performing happiness instead of living it. And then, 18 months into her marriage to Marcus, the posts stopped. Here's where the story takes a turn, because karma doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It slips in quietly, during a family barbecue in the middle of summer, year 3 of my marriage. The year Veronica had predicted Ryan and I would implode. We showed up to my mother's house for the 4th of July, and Veronica was there, sitting alone on the patio, no Marcus in sight. She'd lost weight, not in a healthy way, and there was something brittle about her, like she might shatter if you looked at her wrong. My mother pulled me aside before dinner and whispered, "Don't mention Marcus. They're having problems." Problems, it turned out, was code for Marcus having an affair with his personal assistant, a cliché so perfect it almost felt scripted. I should have felt vindicated. Part of me wanted to. But watching Veronica that day, seeing her try to hold it together while her second marriage crumbled, I felt something unexpected, pity. Not enough to engage with her, not enough to reach out, but enough to see her clearly for the first time. She wasn't my villain. She was just deeply, profoundly unhappy, and she'd been projecting that unhappiness onto everyone around her for years. Still, I kept my distance. Ryan and I mingled, talked about our house renovations, our jobs, our boring, beautiful life. And Veronica watched us from across the yard with something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. Was it envy? Regret? Rage? All three? If you're still with me on this journey of patience and silent vindication, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button because Act 3 is going to show you exactly what happens when karma finishes what it started. And comment below, have you ever watched someone who hurt you self-destruct? Did it feel like justice or just sad? Because what I'm about to tell you walks that line in ways I never expected. 3 months after that barbecue, Veronica's divorce from Marcus was finalized. Messy, public, expensive. He'd hidden assets, she'd fought for everything she could get, and in the end, she walked away with a settlement but no dignity. The family whispered. Social media erupted with vague posts about betrayal and narcissists. And through it all, I said nothing. I didn't reach out with false sympathy. I didn't twist the knife. I just kept living my life, which was entering its most challenging phase yet. Because here's the truth about marriage that nobody posts on Instagram, year 3 through 5 is where the real work begins. Ryan's father got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer the same month Veronica's divorce was finalized. We spent 6 months shuttling between hospitals and hospice care, watching this strong man deteriorate, holding Ryan while he grieved. It was brutal. It was exhausting. It tested every communication skill we'd learned in therapy, and then some. There were nights I wasn't sure we'd make it, not because we didn't love each other, but because grief is heavy and sometimes it's easier to carry it alone than to let someone else see you that broken. But we didn't carry it alone. We carried it together, even when it would have been easier to pull apart. My father-in-law died 3 days before our 4th anniversary. We didn't celebrate that year. We just held each other and cried and promised to keep choosing this, keep choosing us, even when life kept throwing punches. And you want to know the twisted part? That same month, I found out through my mother that Veronica was dating again. Serial dating, actually. A string of men, each relationship lasting a few weeks before she moved to the next one, searching for something she couldn't name. My mother was worried. She's not herself, she kept saying. But I wondered if maybe, finally, Veronica was becoming herself, just not a self she liked very much. Year 5 brought a different kind of pain. I had a miscarriage. 12 weeks, far enough along that we told people, bought tiny clothes, started planning a nursery. And then nothing. Just loss and grief and medical procedures that felt clinical and cruel. Ryan was devastated. I was destroyed. For 2 months, I couldn't get out of bed without feeling the weight of what we'd lost. And this was the moment that could have broken us. The statistics on marriages after miscarriage are grim. Everyone tells you that. But here's what they don't tell you: shared grief, if you let it, can forge bonds stronger than steel. We went back to therapy. We talked about trying again, about whether we even wanted children, about redefining what our family looked like. We fought. God, did we fight? But we fought toward each other, not away. And slowly, painfully, we healed. Not completely, because that kind of loss never completely heals, but enough to keep moving forward. Enough to remember why we started this journey together. Meanwhile, Veronica had moved back in with my mother after her landlord sold her apartment building. She was barely working, living off her divorce settlement, spending days scrolling through social media and nights drinking wine alone. The family was worried, but nobody knew how to help someone who'd spent years refusing to be vulnerable. At family Christmas that year, year 5 of my marriage, 2 years past Veronica's doomsday prediction, she got drunk. Spectacularly, messily drunk. She cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee and said, with vodka-thick words, "You think you're so special. You and your perfect marriage. But you're not. You're just lucky. Wait until life really tests you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen before: desperation. She needed me to fail. She needed Ryan and me to fall apart, because if we didn't, it meant her failures were her own. It meant she couldn't blame timing or luck or the men she chose. It meant she'd have to look inward, and that terrified her more than anything. "Life has tested us, Veronica," I said quietly. "It's been testing us since day one. We just don't perform our struggles for an audience." I walked away, leaving her in the kitchen with her vodka and her bitterness, and for the first time since the bridal shower, I felt something shift. I wasn't proving anything to her anymore. I was just living my life, and her opinion of it had become utterly irrelevant. But the universe wasn't done with either of us yet, because year 7 was coming, and with it, a crisis that would force both Veronica and me to confront who we really were. Ryan got offered his dream job. Director-level position, incredible salary, amazing opportunities for growth. The catch? It was in Seattle. We lived in Chicago. Moving meant I'd have to leave my practice, my clients, the career I'd spent 5 years building. It meant starting over. It meant asking myself the hardest question a person can ask in a marriage: how much of myself am I willing to sacrifice for us? This was it. The moment Veronica had been waiting for, even though she didn't know it was happening. The moment where resentment could take root, where sacrifice could turn bitter, where we could finally prove her right. So what did we do? Well, that's where this story gets interesting. Because the answer wasn't what either of us expected, and it definitely wasn't what Veronica would have predicted. But before I tell you what happened next, I need you to ask yourself something. When your partner's dream conflicts with yours, does someone have to lose? Or is there a third option that nobody talks about? The Seattle decision consumed us for 3 months. We made pro and con lists. We consulted financial advisors, therapists, career counselors. We had the same circular argument every night, neither of us willing to be the one who gave up everything, neither of us willing to ask the other to sacrifice. And then one night, at 2 a.m., exhausted and frustrated and scared, Ryan said something that changed everything. What if this isn't about who sacrifices what? What if it's about what we build together? 3 days later, we had a plan. Ryan took the job but negotiated a hybrid arrangement, 3 days in Seattle, 4 days remote from Chicago. I cut my client load in half and started building an online practice. We bought a small apartment in Seattle and kept our house in Chicago. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what either of us had originally wanted. But it was ours, a solution we'd built together, brick by brick, compromise by compromise. Was it hard? Absolutely. Were there months where we barely saw each other and the loneliness felt crushing? You bet. But we'd learned something over 7 years that Veronica never had. Marriage isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who's willing to build a life with you, even when the blueprint keeps changing. Even when the foundation cracks. Even when the whole damn thing feels like it's going to collapse. You just keep building. And while we were building, Veronica was falling apart. So here's the question that kept me up at night during year 8. When does victory stop feeling like revenge and start feeling like something else entirely? Because I'm about to tell you about the moment everything changed, and it wasn't what I expected. Not even close. The family reunion happened in late September, one of those perfect autumn days where the air smells like apples and everything feels possible. My mother had organized this huge gathering at a state park lodge, celebrating what would have been my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. 3 generations of our family, maybe 80 people total, all gathered to celebrate a love that actually lasted. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Ryan and I drove up from Chicago together, and I remember feeling this quiet contentment, the kind you only get after years of choosing someone through the hard stuff. We were coming up on our 10th anniversary. 10 years. 7 years past Veronica's prediction. And honestly, I'd stopped counting years ago. But Veronica hadn't stopped counting. I saw her the moment we walked into the lodge, sitting alone at a corner table, looking smaller somehow. She'd aged in that way people do when bitterness becomes their full-time occupation, lines around her mouth from frowning, eyes that had lost their spark, clothes that hung on her frame like she'd stopped caring what she looked like. No date this time. No performance. Just Veronica alone, nursing what looked like her 3rd glass of wine before the party had even officially started. My mother had warned me she was in a bad place. Apparently, she'd been fired from her job 3 months earlier for showing up late repeatedly. The settlement money from Marcus was running out. She was barely speaking to anyone in the family, screening calls, declining invitations. But she'd come to this. Why? I didn't seek her out. I mingled, caught up with cousins I hadn't seen in years, watched Ryan charm my elderly aunts with stories about Biscuit, our ridiculous dog. The afternoon unfolded with food and laughter and kids running around the lodge like wild things. And through it all, I was aware of Veronica's eyes on me. Not hostile exactly, but hungry. Like she was watching something she couldn't have and couldn't look away from. The speeches started after dinner. Family members stood up to talk about my grandparents, about what real lasting love looked like, about commitment and choosing each other through 50 years of life's chaos. Each speech felt like a referendum on Veronica's failures, though nobody meant it that way. I watched her flinch with every mention of longevity, every celebration of partnership that survives. And then something happened that I swear I didn't plan. My Uncle Tom, my mother's older brother, stood up to give a toast and he looked right at me and Ryan. I want to recognize my niece and her husband, he said, raising his glass. 10 years this December. In a world where marriages fall apart over nothing, these two have shown us what it means to do the work. To choose each other. To build something real. The room erupted in applause. People turned to smile at us. Ryan squeezed my hand. And I made the mistake of glancing at Veronica. Her face had crumpled. Not in anger, but in something raw. Pain. Pure, unfiltered pain. She stood up abruptly, chair scraping against the wooden floor, and walked out of the lodge. I should have let her go. I should have stayed with Ryan and basked in the recognition, in the victory I'd quietly earned over 8 years of refusing to engage with her toxicity. But something in me, some part one didn't know still existed, couldn't do it. I excused myself and followed her outside. I found her on the deck overlooking the lake, both hands gripping the railing like it was the only thing holding her up. She didn't turn around when I approached, but she knew I was there. Come to gloat? She asked, her voice thick. You've earned it. You won. Congratulations. I didn't know we were competing, I said quietly. It was true. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped trying to prove her wrong and started just living my life. She laughed, bitter and broken. Of course we were competing. We've always been competing. You with your perfect life, your perfect marriage, your perfect ability to make everything look so easy. She finally turned to face me, and her eyes were red. Do you know what it's like to watch everyone else succeed at the one thing you can't figure out? To fail over and over while people like you just don't. And here's where I could have destroyed her. I could have listed every cruel thing she'd said, every prediction she'd made, every moment she tried to poison my happiness. I could have asked her how it felt to be divorced twice while I was still standing. But looking at her broken face, I realized something that shifted everything. Revenge had never been the point. She'd already destroyed herself. She didn't need my help. It's not easy, I told her. Nothing about my marriage has been easy. Ryan and I almost didn't make it a dozen times. We've been to therapy for years. We've cried and fought and questioned everything. The difference isn't that it's easy for us. The difference is we kept choosing each other even when it was hard. Veronica stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. But at my shower I said, I know what you said, I interrupted. 3 years. This won't last. I remember every word. And you know what? There were nights I wondered if you were right. Nights I was so tired and lonely and scared that I thought maybe you saw something I didn't. I took a breath. But I didn't let your prediction become my reality. I didn't let your fear of commitment become my fear. And that's not because I'm better than you, Veronica. It's because I chose differently. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to choose differently, she whispered. I don't know how to not sabotage everything good that comes into my life. I look at you and Ryan and I feel like I'm watching something through a window that I'll never be able to touch. And there it was. The truth that had been hiding under all that cruelty, all those predictions of failure. She hadn't been trying to curse me. She'd been trying to make me as miserable as she was, because my happiness was a mirror showing her everything she couldn't have. Veronica, I said carefully, you could have it. Not my marriage, but your own version of it. But you'd have to stop running from yourself long enough to do the work. And you'd have to stop measuring your life against everyone else's. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Is that what you think? That I can just fix myself and everything will be fine? No, I admitted. I think you need help. Real help. Therapy, maybe medication, definitely some serious self-reflection. And I think you need to forgive yourself for your failures instead of trying to predict everyone else's. We stood there in silence for a long moment, the sounds of the party drifting out from the lodge behind us. I'm sorry, Veronica said finally. For what I said at your shower. For all of it. I was cruel because I was hurting, and that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I nodded. I appreciate that. But the person you really need to apologize to is yourself. I turned to walk back inside, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. I left her there and went back to Ryan, back to the warmth and noise and celebration of love that lasts. We danced that night, slow and close, while my family looked on. And I didn't think about Veronica's prediction anymore. I didn't think about revenge or vindication or proving anyone wrong. I just thought about the man in my arms, the life we'd built, the choice we'd made and kept making every single day. 3 months later, I heard through my mother that Veronica had checked herself into a treatment program for depression and alcohol dependency. She was working on herself, finally, though the road was long and uncertain. Did I feel victorious? No. I felt relieved. For her, and maybe for myself too. Ryan and I celebrated our 10th anniversary with a quiet dinner at the same Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated our first. We didn't talk about Veronica. We talked about the future, maybe trying for kids again, maybe not, maybe just continuing to build this imperfect, beautiful life we'd created. And when we toasted, Ryan said something I'll never forget. To proving that the best revenge isn't proving anyone wrong. It's building something so real that their opinions become irrelevant. We clinked glasses, and I realized he was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped trying to prove Veronica wrong and started just being happy. And that, more than anything, was the victory. So here's my final question for you, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this. When someone who hurt you finally breaks down, do you owe them compassion? Or is walking away the kindest thing you can do? Drop your answers in the comments, because this question defines what kind of person you become after you win. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever had someone doubt you and you proved them wrong just by living well, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel for more stories about patience, pettiness, and the long game of life. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the best revenge is refusing to let bitter people steal your joy. And remember, 3 years, 10 years, 50 years, time doesn't prove predictions right or wrong. Choices do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.